Welcome to Sleep Stories in Rain, where lonely highways and endless nights set the stage for true trucker horror tales. Tonight, we ride with those who brave empty roads, haunted rest stops, and things lurking just beyond the headlights. Only 50% of our viewers are subscribed, so please hit that button and help our haunted convoy grow. Share your own chilling trucking encounters in the comments. Strange hitchhikers, voices on the CB, or midnight shadows that follow for miles. Your stories keep us rolling into the unknown. If you crave suspense and real-life terror on the open road, you're in the right place. Let's fire up the engine and start our first story. The smell of old coffee and stale exhaust fumes still hits me sometimes, even now, years later. It's a phantom smell, a memory that grabs me by the throat and pulls me back to the night everything changed. I was a trucker, just like my old man, logging miles across the country, seeing more of the blacktop than my own bed. This one night, I was hauling a load of refrigeration units, big, heavy boxes that hummed a low, constant drone behind me. I was somewhere in Colorado, high desert country, the kind of place where cell service dies, and the stars feel like they're gonna fall right out of the sky and hit your windshield. The air was thin and cold, and the only sound for miles was the growl of my engine and the whisper of the wind trying to pull the rig off the road. I'd been driving for almost 18 hours, pushing it hard to make my delivery deadline. My eyes felt like they had sand in them, and my hands were locked on the wheel, aching. I saw a beat-up old sign for a truck stop maybe 50 miles out, and that was all the push I needed. A hot coffee and a greasy burger sounded like heaven. The road was empty, just me and my rig and the wide-open black. Then I saw it, way up ahead, a flicker of red, then gone. At first I thought it was a deer's eyes reflecting my headlights, but it happened again, a quick flash of red, like a tail light winking out. Odd, I thought, since there hadn't been any other vehicles for at least an hour. As I got closer, the air got colder, way colder than it should have been. I shivered, even with the cab heater cranked up. The red flicker came again, closer now, and I saw a small, rusted-out car, maybe a Honda Civic, pulled off to the side of the road. No lights on, no hazard flashers, just sitting there in the dark. I slowed down, figuring maybe someone needed help. Could be a flat tire, or maybe they ran out of gas. Pulling my rig over wasn't easy, but I managed to ease it onto the shoulder a good 50 feet behind the car. I grabbed my powerful flashlight from the passenger seat, the heavy kind that doubles as a persuader, and stepped out. The desert wind hit me like a slap, dry and biting. "Hello," I called out, my voice swallowed by the wind. No answer. The car was silent, dark. I walked towards it, my boots crunching on loose gravel. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping over the rusty paint and grimy windows. As I got to the driver's side, I saw it. The back window was busted out, shattered, and inside it was a mess. Papers, empty fast food wrappers, and what looked like dried blood on the seats. A shiver ran up my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. This wasn't a breakdown. This was something else. Then I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the back of my own rig. It was light, like fingernails dragging across metal, high up on one of the refrigeration units. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I slowly turned, pointing my flashlight back towards my truck. The beam danced across the huge metal boxes, finding nothing. Then the scratching came again, louder this time, from the top of the middle unit closest to the cab. It sounded deliberate, like someone was trying to draw my attention. I walked back, my steps hesitant. My flashlight swept over the top of the refrigeration unit, but there was nothing visible from the ground. I climbed onto the side steps of the rig, shining the light upwards, and there it was. Scratched deep into the cold metal side of the refrigeration unit were letters. One word, Freezing. The letters were crude, raw, as if someone had used a rock or a piece of glass to carve them in. My blood ran cold. No one could have climbed up there without me knowing. Not without a ladder, anyway, and I hadn't seen anyone. Then a low, guttural moan came from inside the unit, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very metal beneath my feet. It was faint, weak, but unmistakable. Something was alive in there, inside one of my refrigeration units, and it wasn't supposed to be. These units were sealed, kept at freezing temperatures for the contents. Whatever was in there, it wouldn't last long. I stumbled back, nearly falling off the rig. I scrambled into my cab, fumbling for my keys, my hands shaking so bad I could barely get them in the ignition. I cranked the engine, throwing the rig into gear, and sped off, the sound of that terrible moan echoing in my ears, mixed with the phantom smell of old coffee and stale diesel. I didn't stop until the sun came up, leaving that empty car and that terrifying message far behind me, hoping I'd never see or hear anything like it again. The hum of the big rig was my lullaby, my constant companion on endless ribbons of asphalt. I'd seen lonely roads, quiet deserts, and misty mountains. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the stretch of highway outside Black Creek, Nevada. It was a place that felt forgotten, even by the maps. The kind of place the sun forgot to shine on and the moon only visited to cast long, twisted shadows. It's funny, the things you think about when you're driving through nothingness. You think about home, about the next diner coffee, about the next load. You don't think about the darkness that can spill from the edges of the world and grab a hold of you, not until it's too late. That night, the air itself felt heavy, like it was pressing down on the cab, squeezing out all the light. The stars, usually a brilliant spray over the desert, were gone, swallowed by a thick, oily haze. Even Big Bertha, my reliable old truck, felt sluggish, her engine grumbling a darker tune than usual. I was pulling a refrigerated load, mostly frozen meat, headed for some distribution center way out past Reno. A routine run, boring as dirt until it wasn't. Around midnight, the cabin got cold. Not just a little chill, but a biting, deep cold that sunk into my bones. The kind of cold you feel in a morgue. I checked the AC, cranked the heater, but it was like trying to warm a giant freezer. Then I saw it. A figure, standing by the side of the road, far in the distance, barely visible in my high beams. Lonely, out in the middle of nowhere. My first thought was a hitchhiker. I don't pick up hitchhikers. Too many stories, too many risks. But something about this one, they were just standing there, perfectly still, even as I got closer. I slowed down, curiosity battling with common sense. As I got closer, the figure didn't look like anyone I'd ever seen. It was tall, impossibly thin, like a stick figure drawn by a shaky hand. It wore dark clothes that seemed to drink the light, and its head was tilted at an unnatural angle. No backpack, no thumb out, just standing there, staring straight ahead, not at my truck. My foot hovered over the brake. This wasn't right. Every hair on my arm stood up. I decided to pass. Speed up, get past it, pretend I didn't see anything. Just another weird mirage on a long night. But as I pushed the accelerator, a strange light flickered in my side mirror. It was coming from behind the figure, a dim, pulsating reddish glow like a dying ember. The light pulsed, and then, slowly, the figure started to turn its head. It wasn't a turn like a person turning their head. It was a slow, grinding rotation, like a rusty machine. Its face, if you could call that, was just a blur in the dim light, but I felt its stare. A cold dread seeped into my chest. My heart hammered against my ribs. I floored it, the roar of Bertha's engine, a desperate cry in the silence. The speedometer needle climbed, 70, 80, 90. But when I checked the mirror again, the figure was still there, closer now, its head still slowly spinning, the red light behind it glowing brighter. It wasn't running, it was just there, keeping pace. My breath hitched. This was impossible. No human could keep up with Big Bertha at 90 miles an hour. The red light behind the figure swelled, filling the mirrors, turning the black road behind me into a tunnel of crimson. And then I saw shapes within the light, shadowy forms twisting and writhing, like smoke made solid. They were moving, stretching, reaching towards the truck. My hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. My eyes darted from the road to the mirrors, back and forth, desperate for an escape. There was no escape. They were all around me now, not just the one figure, but countless others, their forms flickering in and out of the red light, their gaunt limbs reaching, their heads tilted in that same unnatural angle. They pressed against the back of the trailer, their shadowy hands leaving icy imprints on the metal. The air was thick with a strange, sweet smell, like decay and something metallic. My head started to swim. I was going to black out. I swerved hard, trying to shake them off. The truck fishtailed, Tires squealing, the trailer swaying violently. I almost lost control, but they held on. They were clinging to the truck, their weight somehow not affecting the balance, their faces, now clearer, staring through the windows. They had no eyes, just hollow sockets. Their mouths were gaping holes, silent screams. I braced myself for impact, for something to smash through the glass, but they just watched. Their movements were jerky, like puppets on invisible strings. And then a sound. Not a scream, not a moan, but a high-pitched, vibrating hum that made my teeth ache. It grew louder and louder, rattling the windows, shaking the entire cab. The dashboard lights flickered, died, then came back on. The radio crackled with static, then a voice, thin and distorted, whispered something I couldn't understand, a language of pure despair. I felt a pressure building inside my head, like my skull was going to burst. I had to get out. I had to get away. I didn't know where, but anywhere but here. I jammed the gear into a lower setting, throwing Bertha forward with a shuddering lurch, praying for a way out. The hum reached a painful crescendo, and then, with a deafening pop, the red light exploded outwards, a blinding flash that engulfed everything. I squeezed my eyes shut, my hands still locked on the wheel. The truck jolted, a sickening lurch that felt like it had hit something massive. I waited for the crash, for the tearing metal, for the end, but it never came. Slowly I opened my eyes. The road was empty. The stars were out, piercing the black sky. The air was clear, cold but not biting. The strange smell was gone. Big Bertha hummed her usual tune, steady and strong. It was as if nothing had happened. But something had. I pulled over, my hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the ignition off. I got out, walked around the truck. No scratches, no dents, nothing. The cold had disappeared. The only thing left was the metallic tang on my tongue and the memory of those empty sockets, those silent screams. I checked the odometer. It was exactly 66.6 miles from where I first saw the figure. I didn't sleep that night. I haven't picked up a single hitchhiker since. And every time I drive through a dark stretch of highway, I glance in my side mirror just to make sure the red light isn't there, growing brighter, bringing back the forgotten things that lurk in the shadows. The smell of stale coffee and diesel was usually a comfort, a sign that the road was my home. That night, it was a suffocating blanket, pressing in on me, making every breath a chore. I can still feel the cold dread that seeped into my bones, a kind of fear that wraps around you like a wet shroud, chilling you to the very core. It wasn't the loneliness of the long haul. I was used to that. It was the feeling of being utterly, terrifyingly alone in a way I'd never known before, with something else in the dark beside me. I was heading through a stretch of road known as the Broken Neck Pass. It earned its name for a reason: sharp turns, steep drops, and barely any light. My rig, a battered but reliable freight shaker, rumbled through the night. The only company I had was the hum of the engine and the crackle of the CB. I'd picked up a load of something vague, just marked as fragile goods for a small desert town way off the beaten path. It was an odd job, paying real good, almost too good. But when you're living paycheck to paycheck on the road, you don't ask too many questions. About halfway through the pass, a thick fog rolled in. Not just a normal fog, but one of those soupy, blinding kinds that eats your headlights. I slowed down, wipers slapping a steady rhythm against the windshield. That's when the CB cut out. Just dead air. No static, no chatter, nothing. I fiddled with the knobs, but it was no use. The silence was heavier than the fog. Then, through the dense white, I saw it, a flicker of light off to the side of the road. It looked like a campfire, small and weak. I figured maybe another trucker broke down, or some campers got stuck. I debated whether to stop. The road was nasty, and I was on a schedule. But the trucker code, the unwritten law of the highway, means you always check on a brother or sister in need. So I pulled over, the air brakes hissing. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and a wrench, just in case. The fog swallowed the truck as soon as I stepped away from the cab. The fire was just a little ways off the road, hidden by a stand of twisted dead trees. As I got closer, I saw it wasn't a campfire at all. It was a single, small kerosene lantern, flickering on the ground in front of an old, rusted-out bus. The kind of bus that looked like it had been sitting there since before I was born. No one was around it, but I could hear a faint, high-pitched scratching sound coming from inside. It sounded like fingernails on a blackboard, but stretched out like something really big was doing it. A shiver ran down my spine, but I tried to shake it off. Just an old bus, probably some wildlife inside. I pushed open the flimsy door of the bus. The smell that hit me was worse than anything I'd ever smelled on the road: damp earth, something metallic, and a sweetness that made my stomach turn. The lantern cast shaky shadows, and I could barely make out anything. The scratching stopped the moment the door creaked open. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom. The seats were ripped, springs sticking out like rusty teeth. In the very back, where the engine should have been, there was an old wooden crate. It wasn't just old, it looked ancient, covered in strange carvings I couldn't quite make out in the flickering light. And around it, on the dusty floor, were dozens of small, empty glass vials, like the kind you'd keep samples in. My heart started to hammer. This wasn't right. Not right at all. Then I saw the faint, dark streaks on the floor, leading from the back of the bus to a small, barely visible hole in the floorboards. It looked like something had been dragging itself. Before I could process what I was seeing, a sudden wet thump came from underneath the bus. I jumped, my flashlight beam wildly swinging around until it landed on something beyond the hole. It was a hand. A pale, long-fingered hand reaching up from the darkness, scrambling for purchase on the edge of the hole. It wasn't a human hand. The skin was too smooth, too white, almost translucent, and the fingers were unbelievably long, tipped with nails like sharpened bone. Before I could scream, it pulled itself up, and I saw a wide, dark eye peer up at me, reflecting the lantern light like a bottomless pit. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, not even bothering to close the bus door. I scrambled back to my truck, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped them. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and threw the rig into gear, roaring out of there, not caring about the fog, not caring about the curves. I just drove. I drove straight through the night, leaving the Broken Neck Pass and whatever nightmare lay in that bus far behind me. I never looked back. But I still check my rearview mirror, even now, always expecting to see those long white fingers clinging to my trailer in the fog.
I remember the night it all began, though I wish I didn't. That feeling, the one that crawls up your spine and whispers that something is deeply, utterly wrong, it started then, a cold current flowing through me as I sat in the cab of the Wanderer, my rig. My life had been nothing but a struggle lately, repairs piling up, invoices getting overdue. This truck, this old Freightliner, was supposed to be my freedom, my livelihood. Instead, it felt like a cage, one that was slowly, deliberately, trying to crush me. I'd been wrestling with a persistent engine problem for days, the kind that makes you want to smash your wrench through the dashboard. Every mechanic I'd seen just shrugged, so I was doing it myself, swearing under my breath, with grease up to my elbows. It was on a late-night fix, tucked away at a grimy rest stop off I-40, when I found it. A hidden latch, small and rusted, under the passenger seat panel. I'd owned the Wanderer for 5 years and never once noticed it. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pried it open with a flathead screwdriver. Inside, wrapped in an old greasy rag, was a faded leather-bound journal. It looked ancient, its cover cracked and pages yellowed. My first thought was score, maybe some old driver's forgotten stash. I peeled back the rag, and the smell of dust and something metallic like old blood hit me. The journal was filled with cramped, messy handwriting, dated decades ago. It wasn't treasure, it was a logbook, but not of miles or cargo. It was a logbook of madness. The first entry I read, dated 1978, chilled me to the bone. Rig acting up again, heard it whispering my name last night, said I had to feed it. The next entry, a few days later, mentioned a flat tire, an impossible one, with something black and viscous seeping from the rubber. More entries described strange breakdowns, voices from the engine, and then a chilling pattern. Each driver mentioned a cost, a hunger, and then their meticulous entries just stopped. Right in the middle of a sentence, as if the writer had simply vanished from their seat. I flipped through more pages. Each driver, a different name, a different year, but the same horrifying end. The last entry was only a few weeks old. Another driver blaming the truck for his bad luck and the whispers. He'd used the truck's old name, the Devourer, a name that made my blood run cold. My truck had a hunger. It became clear. The Wanderer, my truck, was not just broken down, it was breaking down its drivers. I was driving a mechanical monster, and it was getting ready for its next meal. The next few days were a blur of growing fear. The mechanical issues, which had been simple annoyances, became sinister. The brakes would grab for no reason. The steering wheel would fight me, pulling hard to the left, as if trying to veer me off the road. I'd feel a vibration that wasn't right, a low hum beneath my seat, a faint pulse that seemed to match my own terrified heartbeat. One night, a tire blew out with a roar that sounded less like rubber exploding and more like a monstrous belch. I pulled over, heart hammering, but there was no shard of metal, no nail, just a huge, jagged tear, like something had ripped it from the inside out. My old friend, Bert, a dispatcher from the company I used to contract with, called to check in, his voice wavering with concern. "Alexia, you sound bad," he said, his voice crackling over the phone. "Heard you've had a string of bad luck. You all right out there?" I tried to laugh it off, but the sound was hollow. "Just the usual, Bert." I lied, looking at the ripped tire, which already seemed to be seeping that black, viscous fluid described in the journal. It was feeding. The whispers started subtly, just a faint murmur, like the wind rushing through the vents. Then they grew clearer, a low, guttural rumble from the engine block, sounding like my name, Alexia Hungry. I started to hear the old drivers' voices too, faint and desperate, pleading from inside the dashboard. "Don't feed it," they'd moan. I tried to ignore it, to blast my classic rock louder, but the truck seemed to rebel, the radio cutting out, the volume knob turning down on its own. The cabin lights would flicker, making the shadows dance. One night, I saw it in my side mirror, not a reflection of the road, but a pale, distorted face, its eyes wide with terror, pressed against the glass, just for a second. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, but I knew who it was. Another ghost, forever bound to the Wanderer, warning me. I drove faster, pushing the engine, trying to outrun the phantom passengers and the growing hunger of the rig. My goal, once just delivering cargo, became delivering myself from this rolling tomb. I was nearing the end of my route, a frantic dash across 3 states when the truck decided it had enough. The engine screamed, not revving, but a sound of pure agony mixed with rage. The gauges flatlined, the dashboard lights flashed like a frantic call for help, and the steering wheel locked up. I fought it, muscles burning, but the truck veered sharply towards the edge of the road, heading for a deep ravine. It wasn't trying to slow down, it was trying to take me with it. This was it, the final meal. I remembered the journal, the cost, the hunger, and I knew. The truck needed more than just fuel, it needed a life. With a surge of desperate energy, I wrestled the wheel, straining every fiber in my body. My foot slammed on the brake pedal, but it was dead. Nothing. I grabbed my emergency hammer, the one I kept for breaking glass, and with a guttural scream, I smashed the internal wiring of the dashboard, pulling every wire, tearing everything I could reach. Sparks flew, smoke billowed, and the truck groaned, a sickening, dying sound. The steering unlocked for a fraction of a second, just enough for me to yank it sharply away from the edge. The truck slammed into the guardrail, sparks flying, shuddering to a halt inches from the precipice, finally silent. My breath came in ragged gasps, my body aching, but I was alive. I abandoned the Wanderer right there on the roadside. It sat, a hulking, silent beast, smoke still rising from its mangled dashboard. I didn't care about the cargo, the insurance, or the thousands I'd sunk into that cursed machine. I just walked, not even looking back, until a passing pickup truck reluctantly gave me a ride to the nearest town. I never drove a truck again. The thought of feeling that hum beneath me, that cold metal under my hands, makes my skin crawl. Sometimes when a big rig rumbles past on the highway, I still catch the faint scent of diesel and something else, something metallic and dark, and I swear I hear a faint whisper carried on the wind. Alexia Hungry. The Wanderer is still out there. I know it. Somewhere. And it's waiting for its next meal.
I remember the night the dead air started talking. It was a cold, black stretch of I-80, somewhere out in Wyoming, Not a single light for 100 miles except my own rig. The kind of night where the wind sounds like whispers and your own thoughts start playing tricks. I was just trying to make my delivery by morning, pushing hard, sipping lukewarm coffee when it happened. My CB radio, usually just a chatterbox of other drivers or static, cut out. Then a voice, low and raspy, crackled through. "Can you hear me, driver?" I grabbed the mic. "Yeah, I hear you, buddy. What's up? You got a problem?" Silence. Just that weird, heavy static. I tried again, calling out for anyone on the channel. Nothing. Must be a bad patch of signal, I figured. But then it came again, clearer this time. "You're alone out here, aren't you?" My hand froze on the wheel. My gut clenched. I hadn't said I was alone. Who was this? No other truckers were close by on my scanner, not even a mile marker. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just some joker. But the chill in the air wasn't from the Wyoming night anymore. It was in my cab, wrapping around me. I kept driving, pushing the thought away, but the voice came back, not asking questions this time, but stating things. "Turn left at the next unmarked exit." My GPS showed nothing for miles. Just open country, black as pitch. I ignored it, focused on the white lines blurring away under my headlights. The voice grew sharper, more insistent, like gravel turning into razor wire. "You missed it. You're going the wrong way, driver. You're going to be late." Late for what? I was on schedule. Then it said something that made my breath catch. "She's waiting for you. Don't you want to see her?" That hit me like a sledgehammer. My sister. She passed years ago. Nobody knew about her, not through some random CB chatter. Not like this. My heart hammered against my ribs. My foot almost slipped off the pedal. This wasn't some prank. This was something else. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. The air conditioning suddenly felt like ice. I started scanning channels, trying to find another voice, any voice. Just static, hissing like a snake. Then the voice came through again, louder, closer, like it was right inside my head, even though it was coming from the radio. "She misses you, Caleb. She wants to talk. Just pull over. Come find us." Find us? Who was us? I squinted into the darkness. Up ahead, way off in the distance, I saw a shimmering greenish light. It wasn't a town. It wasn't another vehicle. It was just there, hanging low. The voice on the radio, now almost a mournful sigh, urged me towards it. "It's beautiful here, Caleb. No more driving, no more loneliness, just peace." My truck started to pull, just a slight veer towards the light. It wasn't me turning the wheel. It felt like something was dragging the whole rig slowly, steadily off the highway. The dash lights flickered, the engine sputtered. I fought the wheel, wrestling it back to the right. My tires squealed, fighting for grip on the asphalt. The green light pulsed, growing brighter, calling to me. I thought I saw shapes in it, dark figures moving. My sister. No, not her. Not like this. This wasn't peace. This was a trap. I jammed my foot down on the gas, forcing the old rig forward, past the pulling, past the hypnotic light. The CB crackled frantically, the voice now a scream, like 1,000 anguished voices combined. "You can't leave us." The light behind me pulsed once, blindingly, then vanished. The CB went dead. Just absolute silence. No static, no wind, nothing. I drove until the sun started to peek over the horizon, painting the sky with colors that felt too gentle after such a night. I didn't stop until I saw the first gas station lights, miles later. I needed a break, a coffee, anything to make sure I was still real. I delivered the cargo, got my pay, but I never touched that CB radio again. It's still in the cab, sitting there, black and silent. But sometimes, when I'm alone on a long, dark stretch of road, I swear I hear a faint, low hum from it. And sometimes in the dead of night, I wonder if the dead air is still calling out, waiting. The gnawing cold wasn't just the winter wind that night. It was something else. Something that crept under my skin and hasn't left since. I can still feel the tremor in my hands as I gripped the steering wheel. The hum of the big rig, a meaningless drone against the pounding in my chest. It all started on a stretch of highway so empty, the stars felt closer than any town. I was hauling a load of electronics, trying to make good time through the desolate route. The radio had gone silent hours ago, just static and the occasional whisper that made me wonder if I was hearing things. I saw the hitchhiker first as a smudge in my periphery, then a distinct form by the time my headlights caught him. He was a tall guy, coat pulled tight, head down against the biting wind. Truckers don't often pick up hitchhikers these days, not with all the stories. But there was something about him. Maybe it was the loneliness of the road, or perhaps the strange sense of dread that was already settling in. I slowed the rig, the air brakes hissing, and he looked up. His face was pale, almost gray in the harsh light, and his eyes, even from there, looked too wide, too hollow. He climbed in without a word, the cab suddenly feeling cramped and cold. He smelled like damp earth and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. I asked him where he was headed, but he just grunted, pointing vaguely north. I figured he was just a man down on his luck, maybe a bit off. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to ignore the way he shifted in the seat, always just on the edge of my vision. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the truck's rumble. Then I heard it, a soft, scratching sound, like fingernails dragging across glass. I glanced over. His hand was pressed against the window, nails long and dark, slowly scraping. I flinched, and he pulled his hand away, but the sound, that awful grating sound, was still there, echoing in my head. The road began to get twisty, a winding path through thick pines that ate the moonlight. The scratching started again, this time from the back of the cab near the sleeper berth. I snapped my head around, but there was nothing, just shadows in the cold. He was staring straight ahead, unblinking. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was the truck, the wind, my imagination. But the air grew colder, and I could see my own breath. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. The scratching grew louder, faster, like something desperate to get in or get out. I could feel a presence in the cab with us, a silent, watching thing. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the outside air, a prickle on the back of my neck that told me I wasn't alone. I risked another glance at him. He was smiling now, a small, humorless thing that barely moved his lips. His eyes, those hollow, wide eyes, were fixed on something just beyond me. My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I had to get rid of him. I pulled off at the next truck stop, a small, deserted place with only a flickering neon sign. I turned to him, ready to tell him to go, but he was gone. The passenger seat was empty, and the door was firmly shut. I slammed my hand on the dashboard, relief washing over me, quickly followed by a deepening unease. How did he get out? I had been watching, hadn't I? I quickly scanned the empty lot, my high beams cutting through the darkness. Nothing. I tried to tell myself I had imagined it, that he must have slipped out when I was focused on the turnoff. But the smell of damp earth and something metallic still lingered in the cab, a phantom scent that made my stomach churn. I sped off, needing to put as much distance between me and that truck stop as possible. The scratching started again, this time from the roof of the cab, a frantic, skittering noise. It was louder than before, echoing inside the metal shell. I looked up through the windshield, seeing nothing but the dark sky. Then a shadow flashed across the glass, just for a second. My breath hitched. I slammed on the brakes, the rig shuddering to a full halt in the middle of nowhere. I killed the engine, plunging the cab into near total silence, broken only by my ragged breathing. I could hear it then, distinctly, directly above me, a slow, deliberate dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across metal. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Nothing, just the endless, dark highway behind me. I pressed the accelerator again, faster now, desperate to outrun whatever was clinging to my truck. I haven't picked up another hitchhiker since. Every shadow in my peripheral vision, every faint scratch, every creaking sound in the night makes me jump. My truck, my home on the road, feels like a metal tomb. I clean it often, scrub away every speck of dust, but I can still smell it sometimes, that cold, damp earth and sweet metallic scent. And sometimes, usually when I'm on a lonely stretch of road, far from any other living soul, I hear the scratching, faint at first, then growing louder, just above my head. And I know, with a dread certainty that settles deep in my bones, that it's still out there. Or maybe it's still in here with me. The growl of the highway was usually a comfort, a steady hum that lulled me into a road trance. After 25 years behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, it was more home than any house. But not tonight. Tonight, the silence between the rumble of the engine and the hiss of the air brakes felt wrong, heavy, like the cab was holding its breath. And then I heard it, a faint scratch, no louder than a mouse from somewhere behind me. I knew it wasn't a mouse. It was coming from the crate. This delivery had been strange from the start. No manifest, just a slip of paper telling me to haul an unmarked heavy cargo from a dusty, forgotten warehouse in Nevada to a tiny, isolated research lab in upstate New York. Cash up front, more than I'd seen in a year. Too much money. But bills don't pay themselves. The crate itself was unsettling. Dark wood, no labels, wrapped tight in rough canvas. It didn't smell like anything I'd ever hauled. No wood, no chemicals, no machinery, just kind of empty. And old. The scraping grew louder, a slow, deliberate drag like something being pulled against rough wood. I slowed the rig, flicking on my cargo lights, the bright beams cutting through the gloom of the trailer in my rearview mirror. Nothing moved, just the dark, silent bulk of the crate. My gut tightened. Probably just the shifting of the load, I told myself, trying to sound convincing even to myself. These old crates always settled, made creaks and groans. I turned off the lights, pushed the thought away, and focused on the endless black ribbon of asphalt ahead. Then came the whispers. They started small, just at the edge of hearing, like dry leaves rustling in a midnight breeze. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, drafting around the side mirrors, playing tricks on my tired mind. But the voices grew clearer, a low, guttural murmur that seemed to coil around the sound of the engine. They weren't words I recognized, more like a choked, ancient language, soft and harsh at the same time. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to break free. I flipped on the radio, blasting static and a country tune, anything to drown out the sound. It didn't work. The whispers cut through the music, sharp and clear, now seeming to come from inside the cab with me. I pulled off at the next truck stop, lights blazing, the air thick with diesel fumes and the hum of refrigeration units. The whispers quieted some, but didn't vanish. I needed to see what was in that box, to prove it was just some rats or a loose panel. My hands shook as I unlatched the trailer doors. The air inside was cold, colder than it should be in late summer, and smelled faintly of something metallic, like old blood. I shone my heavy-duty flashlight directly on the crate. It was just sitting there, solid, motionless. But then, as the beam hit it, I saw faint, dark stains on the wood, near the bottom. They looked like old, dried liquid, and for a split second I swore I saw the canvas wrapping tighten around the edges, like it was pulling itself tighter. I backed out, heart pounding, slammed the doors shut, and locked them with more force than necessary. My coffee tasted like ash. I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that whatever was in that crate, it wasn't just cargo. I got back on the road, pushing the rig harder than I should. Sleep wasn't an option. The whispers were back, louder now, almost a chorus, a desperate, hungry sound that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. I saw shadows dance in my peripheral vision, quick, fleeting shapes darting just beyond the reach of my headlights. My mind conjured images of clawed hands scratching at the inside of the crate, of unseen eyes staring out through the rough wood. The truck felt like a coffin, and I was trapped inside with something ancient and malevolent. I had never been a religious man, but I found myself muttering prayers I hadn't thought about since I was a kid. I was nearing the drop-off point, a small, unmarked road off the main highway, and every mile felt like a lifetime. The whispers reached a fever pitch, sounding like 100 voices screaming my name, guttural and clawing. The air in the cab grew freezing cold, mist fogging my breath, even though the air conditioning was off. A sickening, sweet smell filled the truck, like rotting meat and withered flowers. As I turned off onto the dirt road, the truck bucked violently, almost pulling the wheel from my hands. Ahead, through the swirling mist and dim light, I saw the research lab, a small, gray building, surrounded by pines, looking far too innocent. The whispers reached a terrifying crescendo. The crate behind me began to shake, groaning and creaking like it would shatter. I slammed on the brakes, my tires spitting gravel. The trailer doors at the back of my rig rattled violently, the metal groaning as if something inside was trying to claw its way out. A loud crack split the air, and I saw, in my side mirror, the reinforced locks on the trailer doors buckle and snap. They swung open, revealing the dark opening of the trailer and the shaking crate. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. A profound, echoing silence fell. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the open doors, my breath hitched in my throat. I didn't see anything claw its way out. I didn't see anything at all, just the empty, cavernous darkness of the trailer. The crate was gone, vanished, the canvas wrapping and its heavy contents. Everything. It was like I had just driven all those miles with an invisible load. The only thing left was that lingering, metallic smell and the overwhelming, bone-chilling cold that still permeated my truck. I drove the empty rig the last quarter mile to the lab, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, my eyes scanning the dark, empty road for any sign of what had been released. There was nothing, just the silence of the night, stretched taut and waiting. I delivered the empty trailer, took my payment, which suddenly felt like 30 pieces of silver, and drove away, never looking back. I still hear the whispers sometimes, in the dead of night, in the rumble of my truck. They just murmur, empty, empty. The rain fell like a drum solo on the cab roof, hard and relentless. It was past 3 in the morning, somewhere between nowhere and nothing, on a stretch of highway I'd driven 1,000 times. Then came the sound, a sickening thud, wet and heavy, that shuddered through the whole rig. I felt it in my bones. I slammed the brakes, the air hiss and the tbit into the slick asphalt. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Had I hit a deer? A stray dog? The thought knotted my stomach because hitting anything out here in this weather was bad news, especially when it felt like more. I killed the engine, the sudden silence deafening except for the downpour. Breathing hard, I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight, swallowed the lump in my throat, and stepped out into the pitch black. The rain instantly soaked through my shirt. My boots squelched. I walked around the front of the truck, the powerful beam cutting through the rain and finding nothing. No deer, no dog, not even a scrape on the bumper, just the slick highway stretching into the dark. I walked further, the light dancing on the wet road. Maybe a tree branch, a phantom hit. My mind tried to dismiss it, to tell myself it was just the storm playing tricks. But the thud had been too real, too solid. As I turned back towards the rig, a flicker of movement caught my eye in the ditch's shadow, deeper than the night itself, melting into the underbrush. Couldn't tell what it was, just a blur, gone as fast as it appeared. I shivered, not from the cold, and got back in the cab, telling myself it was nothing. Just the road messing with Walker. The next day, I was hundreds of miles down the road, the incident almost forgotten. Almost. That evening, parked at a lonely truck stop, eating a sad excuse for a burger, I heard it. A faint scratching, like fingernails on the metal of my cab. I stopped chewing. I looked around the empty parking lot, then at my truck. Nothing. I shrugged it off, probably just the wind or a loose piece of chrome. But then it came again, louder from behind my seat, like someone gently, persistently trying to get in. I froze, my fork clattering onto the plastic tray. I got up, slowly, and peered over the back of the seat. Nothing. I even checked the small sleeper berth. Empty. My breath hitched. It wasn't the wind. It felt deliberate. I spent the rest of the night with one eye open, the scratching a constant, low thrum against my nerves. It got worse. The scratches turned into muffled thumps, like something was dragging itself on the roof or underneath the trailer. Every bump in the road, every sudden stop, would bring a new, unsettling sound. Sometimes I'd swear I heard faint, wet whispers right outside the driver's side window, too low to make out words, just a sloshing, wet sound. I started losing sleep. My old rig, my home away from home, was starting to feel unclean, like something had latched onto it. I checked every inch, every bolt, every weld. I found nothing out of place, but the sounds kept coming. I was calling into dispatch like a madman, muttering about strange noises, and they just told me to get some rest. They didn't understand. How could they? They weren't out here with it. One night, pushing through a long, dark stretch of Texas highway, the sounds started to get really aggressive. The thumping became heavy slams, rocking the whole truck. The whispers turned into a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. In the faint glow of the dashboard, I saw a smear on the back window. Dark like grease, but it pulsed. I slammed the brakes again, the rig shuddering to a halt. My heart leaped into my throat. I grabbed my mag light, my hands shaking. I had to see what was back there. This had to end. I flung open the door and jumped out, the hot desert wind hitting me. I aimed the beam at the back of the trailer. Nothing. Just the shining metal. But then, as I scanned the top, the light caught something. A dark, black mass, like a huge, wet shadow, clinging to the top of the trailer, merging with the lines of the roof racks, almost invisible in the dark. It was the size of a cow. It looked like thick, wet crude oil, but it was moving, rippling, and etched into the thick, grimy smear of it, I saw two faint red pinpricks, like tiny glowing eyes, staring right back at me. They burned with an ancient, chilling hunger. I scrambled back into the cab, slamming the door, my breathing coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop. Not for sleep, not for food, not for gas unless I absolutely had to. I just drove. The thing on the roof, whatever it was, continued its torment. It would mimic the sounds of my own rig breaking down, a tire blowing, an engine knocking. It would scrape against the front windshield, leaving trails of black slime that wouldn't wash off. It was slowly dismantling my sanity. My truck, my life, was being consumed. I tried everything. I tried to outrun it, driving at impossible speeds, but it only seemed to tighten its grip. I tried to wash it off at truck washes, but the dark smear only seemed to grow larger, thicker, covering more of my rig. It was like a living bruise on my truck. It fed on my fear, on my exhaustion. I could feel its cold, heavy presence, a constant weight on my soul. My eyes were burning, my body screaming for rest, but I couldn't stop. I knew if I did, it would get into the cab. It would get me. It wanted me to break down. It wanted me to stop. It felt like it was trying to merge with the truck, make it part of itself, and if I was still in it, my whole world was just me and this thing, on an endless road of horror. The last thing I remember clearly was the feeling of sleep, heavy and sweet, pulling me down, even as I wrestled with the steering wheel. The rig veered, heading straight for a jagged, rocky outcropping. My foot was on the brake, pushing, pushing, but it was like the pedal was stuck, pressed into the floor by an unseen weight. The loud, wet growl from the roof filled the cab, closer now, almost inside my head. The red pinprick eyes glowed from the windshield, reflecting directly into mine. They filled my vision. I saw the flash of the rocks, then nothing. I don't know how long I was out. When I woke up, the rig was sideways, halfway off the road, but somehow not crashed. My head pounded. My whole body ached. The sun was rising, painting the sky in sickly oranges and purples. I looked around, foggy. The truck was covered in the black, oily substance, thick and shimmering, like the whole thing was coated in tar. It oozed in places, glistening. No, it wasn't tar. It was the thing. It had consumed the truck. The cab reeked of something metallic and rotten. My hands, my clothes, they were stained with it too. It had gotten inside. I opened the door, stumbling out onto the dirt shoulder. My legs felt weak. I looked back at the rig. It wasn't just stained, it was changed. The metal was warped and twisted, almost organic, like black, oily skin stretched over bones. And from the deepest shadows between the wheels, where the metal met the earth, I could see them. Hundreds of tiny red pinpricks, burning and moving, like a swarm of angry, hungry eyes. They were everywhere. The truck was alive. Whatever I hit that night, whatever came back with me, it hadn't just latched on. It had swallowed the rig whole, and I was still too close. So I ran. I just ran. I didn't care where. I just knew I had to get away before it decided to truly finish what it started, before I became part of its next meal too. Every sound, every shadow makes me think it's coming for me, dragging its monstrous new body down the asphalt, looking for the one that got away. The hum of the engine was my lullaby, the endless stretch of blacktop my only friend. After the things I'd seen, the things I'd done, the road was the only place that made sense. Each mile was a whisper, telling me to forget, to push on. I was Walker, 38, a former medic, now just another long-haul trucker, chasing quiet miles to outrun the echoes in my head. I thought the open road would heal me, drive out the dark memories that clung to me like exhaust fumes. I was wrong. It started subtly, like a bad dream you can't quite shake. Isolated stretches of highway deep in the fog, the kind of fog that swallows sound, makes the world shrink to just your headlights and the yellow line. I'd be driving, just me and the road, when I'd hear the low growl of another rig right behind me. Too close. I'd check my mirrors, but there was never anything there. Just the fog, thick and choking. Then the sound would shift, change, almost mimic the whine of my own tires or the creak of my trailer. One night, rolling through the Appalachian foothills, the fog was a living wall. I peered through my windshield, my eyes burning. My coffee was long cold. That's when the new sound started. Not just a rig, but a convoy. Heavy engines, a whole fleet, roaring right behind me. My cab shuddered. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. I knew I was alone. I'd seen no other headlights for miles. Yet, I could hear the distinct sound of air brakes, the hiss of a diesel engine slowing behind me. Then another, as if an entire line of trucks was tailgating me in the mist. I checked my mirrors again. Nothing. Just the gray haze, empty and still. It was like a ghost parade, a haunting symphony of phantom trucks. The sound grew, then faded, only to return seconds later, louder, closer. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine, colder than the night air. Was I losing it? Was this the PTSD finally catching up, twisting every sound into a hallucination? I pushed on, tried to convince myself it was just sleep deprivation playing tricks. But the sounds became more real. I heard the distant blare of a horn, then what sounded like someone yelling, muffled by the fog, right outside my window. I slammed on the brakes, sending my rig skidding slightly. Nothing. Absolute silence. The engine hummed, and my heartbeat pounded in my ears. I sat there in the dark, the fog pressing in, my breath catching in my throat. I told myself to calm down, that it was just my mind. But a small part of me, the part that had seen too much, knew better. Then came the lights. Not the gentle glow of fog lamps, but sudden, piercing beams that flashed from the sides of my cab, then ahead, then behind. Impossible angles, impossible speeds. They were like eyes, darting and flickering through the mist, just out of my sight. I could feel a presence, a heavy, cold weight, moving outside my truck, keeping pace. It was a hunting thing, I realized, and I was the prey. The air in the cab grew thick, hard to breathe. The sounds of the phantom convoy returned, louder than ever, roaring past me, even though my mirrors showed nothing. I saw fleeting shapes in the periphery, gigantic, distorted shadows, truck-like, moving with impossible speed and grace through the impossible fog. They were taunting me, playing with me. I wasn't just hearing them anymore, I was feeling them. The terror intensified when I felt the bump. A sharp jolt from the back of my trailer, like a heavy semi had actually rear-ended me. My rig lurched forward. I barely kept it straight. I screamed a raw, desperate sound and floored the accelerator, not caring where I was going, just needing to escape. The phantom convoy was no longer just sounds and lights. It was touching my rig, pushing it, trying to pin me in. I saw a huge chrome bumper appear for a split second in my side mirror, then vanish. I looked back, and a large, dark shadow rose out of the fog directly behind me, its form too vast, too unnatural to be a mere truck. It was getting closer, faster. Every memory, every dark moment from my past, flashed like a strobe light in my mind. The screams of the wounded, the cold of a body gone too soon, the smell of fear. Was this what trauma did? Did it make the monsters real? Or had the monsters always been real, just waiting for my mind to be broken enough to see them? The very therapy I sought on the open road had become my undoing, twisting the peaceful solitude into a horrifying confrontation with something that was both outside me and deep within my own broken self. The phantom convoy wasn't just chasing me, it was dragging me back into the darkest corners of my own mind. I never stopped driving, but the quiet miles never healed me. Instead, they took everything else I had left. Now, the engine hum has a different note. It's not a lullaby anymore. It's part of the chorus, the endless drone of the phantom convoy that surrounds me, every mile of every night. I still drive, but I'm never alone. The road didn't heal me. It just gave my demons a truck of their own, and now they ride with me, forever. The static-laced hiss of the CB radio used to be my best friend out here. That and Ace's voice. He was my mentor, the guy who talked me through every long mile of my first solo haul. I remember it clear as day, the first night that friendship turned to ice in my veins. It was a Tuesday, somewhere in the endless stretch of Nevada desert. Flat, dark, nothing but the stars and the lines on the road. My rig, the Desert Drifter as I called her, hummed along. I'd been on the road for a straight 12 hours, pushing to make a delivery in Flagstaff. "You holding up, Finn?" Ace's voice crackled through the speakers, steady and kind. "Just fine, Ace. Just counting the tumbleweeds," I'd replied, trying to sound as weary and wise as he always did. He chuckled, a low rumble that always made me feel less alone. "That's the spirit, kid. Keep that right hand on the wheel and your left eye on the road. And watch for the shadows out there. They get long this time of night." I thought he meant literal shadows, playing tricks from the moonlight. I soon learned he meant something much, much worse. That was the first hint, the first tiny crack in what I thought was real. Hours later, the tiredness was a thick blanket trying to pull me under. My eyelids felt like sandpaper. "Need to pull over soon, Ace," I mumbled into the mic. "About 20 miles more, kid," he replied, his voice a little clearer now, like head-shifted antennas. "There's a truck stop, old place, just before the next big dip. Good coffee there if it's still open." I squinted through the windshield, seeing naught but the black. "You sure, Ace? My map says nothing for another 50. A beat of static, then his voice, a touch sharper. "Your map's outdated, Finn. Trust me. Been driving this road since before you were a twinkle in your daddy's eye. Just past that big rock formation on your left, there's an old sign. Can't miss it." I leaned forward, straining. A large, jagged rock formation was indeed looming up on my left, but no sign, no truck stop, just endless dark. A shiver ran down my spine, cold despite the heater blasting. It wasn't the first time Ace had contradicted my map, but it was the first time his directions felt so off, like he was seeing a different road, or wanted me to. The real fear started after I pulled into a rest stop, 50 miles past where Ace said the imaginary truck stop should be. I needed to stretch my legs, splash some water on my face. When I got back in the cab, the radio was silent. I tried to hail Ace, but only static answered. A faint, almost whispersome rustle came through the speaker instead, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Then clearer, a sound that twisted my gut, the distinct clink of a metal chain dragging slowly, heavily, right outside my cab. I froze. My hand instinctively went to the door handle, then hesitated. I peered into the darkness, but the only light was the weak glow from the interior. No one around. Just the dragging. I grabbed my flashlight, heart hammering. I pushed the door open, the sound of the chain growing louder. It felt like it was just behind the passenger side of the cab. I swung the light around, beam cutting through the inky black. Nothing, just the empty rest stop. But when I got back inside, the chain clinked again, fading away this time, but definitely from inside the cab. It felt like someone had just stepped out of my truck. I was starting to lose it. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Exhaustion, sure. Loneliness, definitely. But the chain? No way. I tried Ace again, desperate for a real voice. The static hissed, then a new sound joined it. A low, guttural growl, like a hungry animal. It wasn't human. It wasn't even animal. It was wrong. And then I heard it, faint but clear, the growl turning into a distorted, raspy whisper right through the CB. It sounded like Ace, but twisted, like his voice was being pulled through broken glass. "Finn, you're not alone. Anymore." Goosebumps erupted on my arms. I threw the mic down, my hand shaking so hard it rattled against the dash. This wasn't Ace. This was something else. Something that had been listening, learning, pretending to be my friend. Now I don't just drive, I run. Every semi-truck that passes by in the dark, every flicker of headlights in my rearview mirror makes my breath catch. The CB is off, always. But sometimes when the road is too quiet and the darkness too thick, I hear a faint, distorted crackle. And sometimes, when I hit a particularly rough patch of highway, I swear I hear the distinct, rhythmic clink of a chain dragging on the passenger side floor, right where my imaginary hitchhiker would have sat. The only comfort I have is the light of dawn, knowing for a few hours the road isn't just a road. It's a hunting ground, and I'm still trying to outrun the phantom mentor who sought to make me its prey.